Beyond the Dome. Chapter 2. Awakening. The interior of the facility was a battlefield. Energy weapons flashed through dust-filled corridors as Kane's extraction team engaged with Sarah's people in a chaotic firefight. Ash led his team and their new allies through secondary passageways, avoiding the main conflict zones, while making their way back toward the laboratory containing Dr. Reeves' stasis chamber. "How are you breathing the toxic air?" Elias couldn't contain his scientific curiosity despite the danger, his voice tight with adrenaline as they moved through a maintenance tunnel. Sarah, running point with a weapon that appeared to be salvaged pre-collapse military technology, answered without turning. "Adaptation. Some natural, some engineered. We'll explain when we're not dodging energy blasts." Ash noted that while Sarah had briefly removed her helmet earlier, presumably for dramatic effect, she and her companions now wore their specialized environmental suits with helmets secured. Adaptation might allow survival in toxic conditions, but apparently not without consequences or limitations. "Access shaft ahead," Ash announced, checking the facility map they'd downloaded earlier. "It should lead us directly to the lab level, bypassing the main corridors where most of the fighting is concentrated." The shaft was narrow, designed for maintenance drones rather than human transit, but their suits' enhanced mobility systems made the descent manageable if uncomfortable. They emerged into a dimly lit service corridor, one level below the main laboratory. "We're directly under the stasis chamber now," Elias confirmed, checking his equipment. "There should be an access point. There." He pointed to a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. As Marcus prepared to open the hatch, Juno raised a hand for silence. She lifted her head slightly, as if listening. "Kane's team is in the lab," she whispered. 4 signatures, setting up a perimeter around the chamber. Ash exchanged a glance with Sarah. "How do you know that?" Instead of answering, she tapped the side of her helmet. "Enhanced sensory systems. Another adaptation." She motioned to Marcus, who produced what appeared to be small metallic discs from a pouch. "Non-lethal incapacitation devices. They'll disrupt their neural functions temporarily without causing permanent damage." The ethical implications weren't lost on Ash. Kane had authorized lethal force without hesitation, while these supposed wasteland scavengers were using non-lethal methods despite being fired upon. It added another layer to his growing suspicion that the narrative he'd been taught about the world outside Eden 9 was deeply flawed. "I'll go first," Sarah decided. "I need you to provide your authorization codes once we're in position, Harvester. Your dome credentials should bypass the stasis chamber's security lockouts faster than our methods." Ash nodded, though uncertainty continued to gnaw at him. He was actively betraying Eden 9's direct orders, allying with outsiders against his own people. Yet the evidence before him, humans adapted to wasteland conditions, Director Kane's disturbing authorization of lethal force, the hidden research facility, all suggested that the betrayal might have begun long before, with Eden 9 concealing crucial truths from its citizens. Marcus opened the hatch with practiced efficiency, and Sarah ascended first, the strange discs held ready. The others followed quickly, emerging into the laboratory where they discovered the stasis chamber hours before. As Juno had predicted, 4 members of Kane's team had established positions around the chamber, clearly preparing it for transport. The next moments unfolded with practiced precision. Sarah and her companions launched the discs simultaneously, each finding its target. The devices attached to the Eden 9 security team's armor and emitted a brief pulse of energy. The 4 guards stiffened momentarily before collapsing, their nervous systems temporarily overridden by whatever technology the discs employed. "Clear," Sarah announced, already moving toward the stasis chamber. "Harvester, we need those access codes now. Kane will have detected the neutralization of his team." Ash moved quickly to the chamber's control interface, keying in his high-level Harvester authorization. The system recognized his credentials immediately, displaying a new set of options previously hidden behind security protocols. "I need the stasis control module," Elias said, joining him at the interface. Despite the chaotic circumstances, the younger Harvester's scientific training took over as he analyzed the complex system. "We can't just shut it down. The subject has been in suspended animation for decades. Improper revival could cause catastrophic physiological shock. Here, Juno joined them, connecting a specialized device to the stasis chamber's secondary port. This contains medical revival protocols specifically designed for long-term suspension cases. Elias looked at her with renewed surprise. How do you have technology specifically designed for this purpose? Because Dr. Reeves isn't the only pre-collapse scientist who went into stasis, she replied matter-of-factly. Just the only one Eden-9 knows about. The revelation landed like a physical blow. More stasis subjects? Other survivors from before the collapse? It contradicted everything Dome citizens had been taught about the catastrophic nature of the environmental disaster and the near-total extinction it had caused. Ash pushed the questions aside, focusing on the immediate task. "Revival protocol activated," he reported as the stasis chamber's indicators shifted from blue to a pulsing amber. "Estimated completion time?" 17 minutes for safe revival, Elias answered, studying the readouts. "We can't accelerate it without risking neural damage." "We don't have 17 minutes, Marcus warned from his position by the laboratory entrance. "I'm picking up movement in the main corridor. Kane's bringing in reinforcements." Sarah made a quick decision. "Juno, stay with the chamber, complete the revival process. Marcus and I will secure the perimeter." She turned to Ash. "Your team has a choice. Help us extract Dr. Reeves and learn the truth about what Eden-9 has been hiding. Or surrender to Kane when he arrives. We won't force you either way." It was barely a choice at all, given what they'd already witnessed. "We're seeing this through," Ash decided, speaking for his team, but noting the affirming nods from both Elias and Riya. "What do you need us to do?" "Help Juno with the revival. Your technical knowledge of the stasis systems will be valuable." She paused, meeting his gaze directly. "And be prepared for what you're about to learn. Some truths are harder to accept than others." With that cryptic warning, Sarah and Marcus moved to defensive positions near the laboratory entrances, preparing for the inevitable confrontation with Kane's forces. Ash joined Elias and Juno at the stasis chamber, where the revival process was now fully engaged. The chamber's transparent cover had begun to clear, revealing its occupant more distinctly than before. A woman appearing to be in her mid-40s, her features serene in suspended animation, dark hair streaked with gray at the temples. Dr. Isabel Reeves, lead scientist on Project Lazarus, and possibly the key to understanding how humans could survive in the toxic wasteland without dome protection. "Vital signs stabilizing," Elias reported, monitoring the medical readouts with professional focus despite the tension of their situation. "Neural activity increasing. She's beginning to emerge from suspension. We need to prepare for immediate mobility," Juno said, removing a compact medical kit from her pack. "She'll be disoriented and physically weakened, but we can't afford a standard recovery period." The chamber's indicators shifted from amber to green as the revival process entered its final phase. The preservation fluid that had surrounded Dr. Reeves began to drain, and medical systems within the chamber administered stimulants designed to accelerate the transition from suspended animation to consciousness. Dr. Reeves's first breath was a gasping, desperate thing. The sound of someone breaking the surface after nearly drowning. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then blinking rapidly as consciousness returned. Confusion, fear, and disorientation played across her features as the chamber's cover fully retracted. "Dr. Reeves," Juno said clearly, leaning over the chamber. "You're safe. Project Lazarus was successful. You've been in stasis for 52 years. We need to move you quickly." The woman's eyes focused on Juno, then darted to Ash and Elias in their harvester suits, widening with evident alarm. "Eden-9, she whispered, her voice hoarse from decades of disuse despite the stasis chamber's preservation systems. "They found me." "Yes," Juno confirmed. "But so did we. The Adaptation Coalition. We're here to ensure your research reaches those who will use it as intended, not those who would suppress it." Dr. Reeves struggled to sit up, her movements weak but determined. "My data, the research." "We've secured it," Elias assured her, indicating the storage devices containing the downloaded research. "Complete records of Project Lazarus, including your genetic modification protocols." A sudden burst of weapons fire from the corridor outside interrupted their conversation. Sarah's voice came through their communication channel. "Kane's team is breaching the east entrance. We can't hold them for long." "Help me with her," Juno instructed, and Ash moved to support Dr. Reeves as she emerged fully from the chamber. Despite the revival stimulants, she was clearly struggling with the physical effects of prolonged stasis, her movements uncoordinated and weak. "The coalition survived," Dr. Reeves murmured as they helped her stand, seeming to draw strength from the realization. "They told me it was theoretical, that adaptation might not be viable long-term." "More than viable," Juno confirmed. "There are 14 established adaptation communities across the former North American continent now, with over 20,000 survivors." The numbers shocked Ash. 20,000 people living in the wasteland? It was inconceivable based on everything he'd been taught about post-collapse survival. Eden 9's population was approximately 40,000, and they had been led to believe it represented a significant percentage of remaining human life on the planet. "Incoming!" Marcus shouted from his position. A moment later, a concussive blast shook the laboratory as Kane's forces breached the outer defenses. "We need to move now," Sarah ordered, backing into the laboratory while maintaining covering fire. "Juno, is she mobile?" "Barely," Juno replied, supporting Dr. Reeves, who was now standing but clearly unsteady. "We need the mobility assist." Marcus quickly produced what appeared to be a collapsed exoskeleton frame from his pack, unfolding it into a support structure that could be fitted around Dr. Reeves's body. The technology was elegant in its simplicity, not the advanced cybernetics of Eden 9, but a practical, durable design clearly built for wasteland conditions. As they secured the device around her, Dr. Reeves noticed the Eden 9 insignia on Ash's suit. "You're dome dwellers," she observed, her scientific mind evidently sharp despite her physical weakness. "Why are you helping the coalition?" "Because we're starting to suspect our dome has been lying to us," Ash replied simply. "About the wasteland, about adaptation possibilities, about people like you." Dr. Reeves's expression shifted, a complex emotion crossing her features. "The domes were never meant to be permanent," she said quietly. "They were emergency shelters while adaptation research progressed. A temporary solution, not humanity's final refuge." Before Ash could process this revelation, Sarah cut in urgently. "Philosophy later. We need the secondary exit route now." "This way," Elias directed, indicating the maintenance shaft they had used to enter. "It leads to service tunnels that should bypass the main confrontation areas." They moved as quickly as Dr. Reeves's condition allowed, helping her toward the maintenance access point. The exoskeleton support system compensated for her muscle weakness, but coordination and balance issues from the revival process couldn't be so easily addressed. As they reached the access point, Director Kane's voice came over the facility's emergency communications system. "Harvester Tanner, this is your final warning. Surrender Dr. Reeves and the research data immediately. This is a direct order under Priority Omega protocols." Ash hesitated, years of conditioning making the direct defiance of such an order almost physically painful. Kane continued, his voice taking on an unexpectedly personal tone. "Ash, I understand your confusion. You've seen things today that contradict your training, but there are larger issues at stake than you realize. The stability of Dome society itself depends on controlled information about adaptation possibilities." Sure. The admission was startling in its directness. Kane wasn't denying that Eden 9 had concealed information. He was justifying it. "What's he talking about?" Ash demanded, turning to Sarah as Marcus helped Dr. Reeves into the maintenance shaft. "What larger issues?" "Population control," Dr. Reeves answered before Sarah could respond. "Resource allocation, power structures." Her voice was growing stronger as the revival stimulants took full effect. "If Dome citizens knew they could adapt to external conditions, that the wasteland isn't universally lethal, the entire social hierarchy would collapse." Sarah nodded grimly. The domes were designed as temporary shelters during the worst of the collapse, with strict resource management and population controls justified by the supposedly permanent uninhabitability of the external environment. Once Dome leadership realized they could maintain power indefinitely by controlling that narrative, They suppressed adaptation research, Elias finished, the implications clearly disturbing him deeply. Kept their populations isolated and dependent. Another blast rocked the facility, closer this time. Debate later, Riya urged from the maintenance shaft entrance. They're almost through the secondary barriers. Ash made his decision, not just for himself, but for what he now understood might be the future of humanity beyond dome control. Let's move. They descended through the maintenance shaft and into the service tunnels below, Ash leading with his harvester suit's enhanced environmental sensors active, identifying the least damaged route through the deteriorating infrastructure. Behind them, the sounds of conflict continued as Kane's forces engaged with the remaining Adaptation Coalition members who were covering their retreat. Your people, Ash asked Sarah as they navigated the narrow passages. Can they escape? They knew the risks, she replied simply. And they're better adapted to wasteland conditions than Kane's team. They'll disperse and rendezvous at secondary locations. The implication was clear. This wasn't the Coalition's first operation against Dome interests, and they had developed tactics accordingly. It raised more questions about the true relationship between the Domes and the adapted wasteland communities, questions Ash suspected had uncomfortable answers. They emerged from the facility through a maintenance exit on the western side, the storm still raging but somewhat diminished in intensity compared to its peak. Visibility remained poor, but their suit sensors could now detect a collection of vehicles approximately 200 meters away. Clearly, the Coalition's transport rather than Eden 9's extraction team. Rover status? Ash called to Riya, who was monitoring their communication channels. Compromised, she reported. Eden 9 forces have secured it. We're officially stranded unless we extract with the Coalition. It wasn't truly a choice anymore. They had crossed too many lines, defied too many direct orders. Even if they somehow explained their actions as confusion during a crisis, the fact remained that they had helped secure Dr. Reeves and her research for the Adaptation Coalition rather than Eden 9. In the strict hierarchical system of Dome governance, such actions could easily be classified as treason. As they approached the Coalition vehicles, rugged, modified pre-collapse transports clearly designed for wasteland conditions, Ash found himself in the disorienting position of being a refugee from the very society he had spent his life serving. Everything about this situation contradicted his training and identity as a harvester. I know what you're feeling, Dr. Reeves said unexpectedly, now moving with greater confidence in the mobility assist frame. I felt it too, when I realized the adaptation program was being shut down for political reasons rather than scientific ones. That moment when you discover institutions you trusted have betrayed their founding principles. Ash nodded, unable to articulate the complex emotions churning through him. Eden 9 was supposed to preserve humanity until the world could be restored, he said finally. That was our purpose, our justification for all the restrictions and controls. If that was a lie, not entirely a lie, Dr. Reeves corrected. The Domes do preserve human life. They just weren't meant to be humanity's only future. She gestured towards Sarah and her companions. Adaptation was always the long-term plan, humans evolving to thrive in the changed environment rather than hiding from it indefinitely. They reached the Coalition vehicles, where more adapted humans waited, some in protective gear similar to Sarah's team, others with varying levels of environmental protection that suggested different degrees of adaptation to wasteland conditions. Dr. Reeves secured, Sarah announced as they approached, along with complete research data and 3 Eden 9 harvesters who assisted with the extraction. A tall woman with striking features marked by subtle adaptations, eyes with a secondary protective membrane, skin with a faintly different texture than standard human epidermis, stepped forward from the lead vehicle. Dr. Reeves, she greeted with evident respect. I'm Commander Vega. My grandmother was Elias Chen. She spoke of you often. Recognition flashed across Dr. Reeves's face. Elias was just a graduate student when we initiated the stasis protocol. She believed in adaptation when most of the scientific community was focused exclusively on dome technology. She studied Vega with professional interest, and clearly, her faith was justified. Your adaptations are 3rd generation? 4th, Vega corrected. The process has been refined significantly based on your initial research. though we've lacked access to the complete data until now. She turned her attention to Ash and his team. As for you three, you've taken an irreversible step today. You understand you can't return to Eden 9 after this? The reality of their situation settled over Ash with crushing finality. Everything he had known, his position as a senior harvester, his residence in the dome, his entire social identity, was now behind him. He was, effectively, a stateless person in a world he had been taught was uninhabitable without dome protection. "What happens to us now?" he asked, his voice steady despite the uncertainty churning within. "That depends on what you want," Vega replied candidly. "We can offer sanctuary in Coalition territory. Your technical knowledge would be valuable, especially regarding current dome operations and technology. In exchange, you'll learn the truth about the wasteland, about adaptation, about what your dome has been concealing for generations." "And if that truth conflicts with everything we've been taught to believe?" Elias asked. The scientific curiosity in his voice mingled with evident apprehension. "Then you'll face the same choice all of us did when we discovered it," Sarah interjected. "Adapt to reality or cling to comfortable fictions." A sudden increase in weapons fire from the facility indicated that Kane's forces had likely eliminated the remaining Coalition resistance inside and would soon be pursuing them. Commander Vega gestured urgently toward the vehicles. "Decision time, Harvesters. Are you coming with us or taking your chances with Kane's Priority Omega protocols?" Ash looked at his team. Elias, the brilliant young technician whose scientific curiosity had always pushed against the constraints of dome research protocols. Riya, the communications specialist whose quiet competence had saved their lives countless times in the wasteland. Both looked back at him with expressions that mixed fear and determination in equal measure. "We're coming," Ash decided, speaking for all of them with their silent assent. "But I want your word that we'll be free to make our own choices once we understand what's really happening. We're not trading one form of control for another." Vega nodded, a hint of respect in her expression. "Agreed. The Coalition isn't like the Domes, Harvester. We value individual choice precisely because it was denied to us for so long." She gestured toward the vehicles. "Now move. Kane won't give up easily, especially with what's at stake." They boarded quickly. Dr. Reeves assisted into the lead vehicle with Vega, while Ash and his team joined Sarah in the second transport. As they secured themselves, Ash couldn't help but look back toward the facility, the place where his understanding of the world had begun to unravel just hours before. The vehicles surged into motion, powerful engines designed for wasteland terrain accelerating them away from the facility and the approaching Eden 9 forces. Through the swirling dust of the diminishing storm, Ash caught a glimpse of Director Kane emerging from the building, surrounded by his security team. Even at a distance, the director's posture conveyed fury and determination. "He'll pursue," Ash warned Sarah as they put distance between themselves and the facility. "Priority Omega means unrestricted resource allocation. He'll have backup teams, aerial surveillance, possibly even military-grade vehicles from Eden 9's defense reserve." "We're counting on it," Sarah replied with unexpected confidence. "In fact, we're hoping he follows us quite a distance." At Ash's questioning look, she elaborated. "The Coalition has been trying to locate Eden 9's external security installations for years. Nothing reveals hidden infrastructure like a full-scale pursuit operation." The strategic thinking impressed Ash despite his conflicted loyalties. The Coalition clearly operated with sophisticated long-term planning, not the desperate survival tactics of wasteland scavengers as Eden 9 had characterized them. As their vehicle convoy accelerated to maximum speed, following a route that appeared random but which Ash suspected was carefully planned to reveal Eden 9's security response patterns, he turned his attention to the immediate questions burning in his mind. "How is adaptation even possible?" he asked Sarah directly. "Everything we've been taught indicates the wasteland's toxicity levels are incompatible with unprotected human biology." "They were, initially," she acknowledged. "The early years after the collapse were as deadly as your dome history probably describes. But Dr. Reeves and the original Adaptation Coalition developed genetic modifications that could be integrated into the human genome over generations. Changes to respiratory systems, enhanced detoxification pathways in the liver, modified epidermal protection. But genetic engineering on that scale, Elias interjected, his scientific mind clearly grappling with the implications. The technical challenges would be enormous, not to mention the ethical considerations of heritable modifications. Desperate times, desperate measures, Sarah replied simply. When the choice is extinction or evolution, ethical constraints shift accordingly. How many adapted humans are there? Riya asked, speaking up for the first time since they'd left the facility. Commander Vega mentioned 20,000, but that seems small, Sarah finished for her. It is. The adaptation process was slow initially, with high failure rates. It's only in the last 2 generations that we've achieved stable inheritance patterns and higher survival rates for adapted children. But our population is growing now, while the domes remain fixed in size due to resource constraints. The implications were profound. If the Coalition's adaptation technologies continued to improve, they represented a potential future for humanity beyond the artificial constraints of dome existence. A return to the wider world, albeit a changed one requiring biological adaptation rather than environmental restoration. And the domes know about all this, Ash said, the pieces falling into place. They've known about adaptation possibilities for decades, but concealed it from their populations. Sarah nodded grimly. Dome leadership understood early on that their power derived from scarcity management and population control, justified by the supposed permanent uninhabitability of the external environment. If Dome citizens knew adaptation was possible, that humans could eventually reclaim the outside world, that power structure would collapse. But surely restoration is better than adaptation, Elias argued. Eden 9's Environmental Science Division has been working on technologies to eventually cleanse the atmosphere, detoxify soil, restore natural ecosystems. Restoration was always a multi-century proposition at best, Sarah replied. Adaptation offered a faster path to human survival. The 2 approaches weren't mutually exclusive originally. Both were part of humanity's response to the collapse. But Dome leadership eventually chose the path that maintained their control structures. Their conversation was interrupted by an alert from the vehicle's sensor systems. "Aerial pursuit detected," announced the driver, a woman with the distinctive adapted features Ash was beginning to recognize. Eden 9 scout drones, approximately 5 kilometers behind and closing. Sarah remained unperturbed. Right on schedule. Engage countermeasures, but maintain course for another 20 kilometers before initiating evasion pattern Delta. The strategic confidence was simultaneously reassuring and disconcerting to Ash. He had spent his career believing Eden 9 represented the pinnacle of remaining human organizational capability in a collapsed world. The Coalition's evident sophistication challenged that assumption fundamentally. As the convoy continued its calculated flight across the wasteland, deliberately drawing Eden 9's pursuit resources into the open while following a predetermined route designed to eventually evade them, Ash found himself in the unprecedented position of analyzing his dome's tactical capabilities as potential threats rather than assets. "The drones have limited operational range," he found himself explaining to Sarah, the harvester in him automatically assessing threats despite his shifting allegiance. "They'll be followed by ground vehicles with extended range capabilities, probably deployed from outpost stations rather than the dome itself." "Exactly what we're counting on," Sarah confirmed. Every response reveals another piece of their external security network. The vehicle suddenly altered course, following the lead transport as it veered sharply toward what appeared to be an impassable cliff face. As they approached at alarming speed, a concealed entrance became visible, a narrow passage through the rock formation, barely wide enough for their vehicles. "Coalition territory begins here," Sarah explained as they entered the passage, the pursuing drones unable to follow through the confined space. "We have a network of monitored approaches and defensive positions throughout this region. Eden 9's forces won't follow blindly into terrain we know better than they do." The passage opened into a broader canyon system. The toxic wind currents channeled between the rock formations, creating natural barriers to aerial surveillance. The convoy continued through this labyrinthine landscape for nearly an hour, following a route that appeared unmarked but which the drivers navigated with confident familiarity. Eventually, the canyon system gave way to an expansive valley sheltered by surrounding mountain formations. And there, in direct contradiction to everything Ash had been taught about the uninhabitability of the wasteland, stood an adapted human settlement. Unlike the sleek, technological perfection of Eden 9, this community represented a different approach to post-collapse survival. Structures built partially into the rock faces for natural protection from storms, combined with ingeniously designed buildings using modified pre-collapse materials. Environmental management systems were visible throughout: air filtration arrays, water purification stations, and most surprisingly, areas of cultivated plant life adapted to the toxic soil conditions. "Welcome to Nexus Point," Sarah announced as their vehicles approached the settlement perimeter. "One of 14 coalition communities, and the closest thing we have to a central coordination facility." Ash stared in disbelief at the settlement, at people moving about without the full environmental protection suits that harvesters required, at children playing in spaces that should have been lethally toxic, according to everything he had been taught. Many showed visible adaptations: the subtle skin modifications, protective eye membranes, and other biological changes that Sarah and her team exhibited. But they were undeniably human, undeniably thriving in conditions that Eden 9 had declared unsurvivable. "How long has this existed?" he asked, unable to keep the shock from his voice. "Nexus Point was established 27 years ago," Sarah replied. "The first coalition settlements date back nearly 40 years, though they were much smaller and less sophisticated than what you see now." 40 years. More than a generation of adapted humans living in the wasteland, while Dome citizens remained convinced that no such adaptation was possible. The scale of the deception was staggering. Their vehicles passed through a security checkpoint where coalition members with more extensive protective gear, presumably those with less complete adaptations, conducted scans for potential contaminants or tracking devices. After clearance, they proceeded to what appeared to be a medical facility near the center of the settlement. "Dr. Reeves will need comprehensive medical evaluation after her extended stasis," Sarah explained as they disembarked. "And I imagine you three will have questions that our medical team can help answer regarding adaptation physiology." It was an understatement. Ash had more questions than he could articulate, his entire understanding of the post-collapse world crumbling with each new observation of the coalition settlement. Everything about Nexus Point contradicted the fundamental premises upon which Dome society was structured: that the external environment remained uniformly hostile to human life, that Dome technology represented humanity's only viable survival strategy, that resource limitations justified the strict social controls Eden 9 imposed on its citizens. Dr. Reeves was transferred directly to the medical facility, where a team of professionals with an intriguing mix of pre-collapse medical technology and adapted coalition innovations awaited her. Before entering, she turned to Ash and his team. "I understand how disorienting this must be for you," she said, her voice stronger now, though still showing the effects of her long stasis. "I felt something similar when I realized the adaptation program was being shut down for political rather than scientific reasons. But remember, the domes themselves weren't the betrayal. They were necessary. It was the suppression of alternatives, the deliberate limitation of human potential, that constituted the true violation of trust." With that philosophical distinction offered, she was taken into the facility for treatment, leaving Ash, Elias, and Riya standing with Sarah in the settlement's central plaza, surrounded by the impossible reality of adapted human civilization in the wasteland. "What happens now?" Ash asked, the question encompassing far more than their immediate future. "Now you learn," Sarah replied simply, "about adaptation biology, about coalition history, about the true relationship between the domes and the outside world. Then, when you understand what's really at stake, you decide where your allegiance lies." "And if we choose to return to Eden 9? Riya asked cautiously. "To inform others of what we've discovered?" Sarah's expression remained neutral. "That would be your choice. Though I should warn you, Dome leadership has protocols for dealing with citizens who discover external adapted communities. They're called containment procedures, and they're not primarily concerned with physical quarantine." The implication was clear. Even if they somehow returned to Eden 9, any attempt to share what they discovered would likely be suppressed through discreditation, confinement, or worse. The Dome's information control systems were as sophisticated as its environmental management technologies. Commander Vega approached, having overseen Dr. Reeves's transfer to the medical facility. The harvesters will be provided quarters in the adaptation transition section, she informed Sarah. They'll need time to acclimate both physically and psychologically. She turned to address Ash directly. Your team will be granted provisional coalition status while you learn and consider your options. You'll have access to most community areas, though some research facilities remain restricted until we've established trust. It was a more generous arrangement than Ash had expected, given their former allegiance to Eden 9. Thank you, he acknowledged. We understand the security concerns. It's not just security, Vega corrected. Adaptation exposure needs to be carefully managed for dome-raised humans. Your biology hasn't been prepared for direct environmental interaction. We'll need to conduct assessments before determining what level of adaptation support you might require. The medical implications hadn't fully registered until now. If they remained with the Coalition, they would eventually need to undergo some form of the adaptation process themselves. Genetic modifications to survive in the wasteland without the constant protection of harvester suits. It was a physical transformation as profound as the psychological one they were experiencing. As they were led toward the adaptation transition housing, a section of the settlement apparently designed for new arrivals with limited environmental tolerance, Ash found himself studying the Coalition community with the analytical eye of a harvester. Resource management systems, energy generation, security protocols, all different from Eden 9's approaches but equally sophisticated in their own way, adapted to wasteland conditions rather than attempting to create a perfect internal environment isolated from external reality. The transition quarters consisted of a comfortable apartment with filtered air systems and decontamination protocols less stringent than Eden 9's, but sufficient for their unmodified biology. After Sarah left them to settle in, promising to return in the morning to begin their orientation, the three former harvesters found themselves alone for the first time since their world had turned upside down at the research facility. "What have we done?" Riya asked quietly, the question hanging in the air between them. "Discovered the truth," Elias replied, his scientific mind apparently already adapting to their new reality more readily than the others. Or at least started to discover it. The biological adaptation achievements alone represent a scientific breakthrough beyond anything Eden 9 has accomplished in generations. "We've committed treason," Ash stated flatly, naming the reality they all recognized but had avoided articulating. "According to Dome law, we've betrayed everything we were sworn to protect." "Have we?" Elias challenged. "We were sworn to protect humanity's future. If Eden 9 has been actively suppressing a viable alternative survival strategy, one that could eventually allow humans to reclaim the planet rather than hiding in artificial environments indefinitely, then who really betrayed that mission?" It was the central question, the one Ash had been grappling with since they first encountered Sarah and her adapted companions. If adaptation represented a legitimate path for human survival and eventual recovery that Dome leadership had deliberately suppressed to maintain power structures, then loyalty to humanity's future might actually require disloyalty to Dome governance. "We need more information before we can make any real judgments," Ash decided, falling back on the Harvester's fundamental approach to uncertainty. "We observe, we analyze, we verify independently. Then we decide where truth and right action lie." Riya nodded, finding comfort in the familiar methodology despite their unfamiliar circumstances. Harvester protocols adapted to a different kind of extraction mission. Information instead of resources. "Exactly," Ash confirmed. "We approach this like any high-risk wasteland operation. Maintain awareness, verify data through multiple sources, assess risks continuously, and preserve our ability to adapt to changing circumstances." The irony of using adapt in their current context wasn't lost on any of them, a grim humor finding its way through their shock and uncertainty. As they settled into their temporary quarters, each processing the day's revelations in their own way, Ash found himself drawn to the window overlooking the Coalition settlement. Night had fallen, and Nexus Point presented a strikingly different appearance than Eden 9's perpetually illuminated dome environment. Lighting was used selectively and efficiently, creating pockets of activity amid strategic darkness that presumably preserved energy resources. People moved about with the confidence of those fully accustomed to their environment, adapted not just biologically but culturally to wasteland conditions. It represented a fundamentally different approach to post-collapse survival than the dome's perfect, controlled environments. Not better or worse necessarily, but different in its basic assumptions about humanity's relationship with the changed Earth. Adaptation rather than isolation. Engagement rather than withdrawal. Evolution rather than preservation. Tomorrow, they would begin learning the details of coalition history, adaptation biology, and the complex relationship between the domes and the outside world they had supposedly abandoned as uninhabitable. Tomorrow, they would start to understand what Dr. Reeves's research truly represented and why both Eden 9 and the Coalition had been willing to risk lives to secure it. But tonight, watching the adapted community from their transition quarters, Ash allowed himself to face the most difficult truth of all. Everything he had built his identity upon, his role as a harvester, his loyalty to Eden 9, his understanding of humanity's post-collapse reality, had been constructed on incomplete or deliberately falsified information. The foundation of his existence had been revealed as partially hollow, and whatever he would become now would have to be built on new understanding, new truths. As a harvester, he had been trained to extract resources from the wasteland to sustain Eden 9's isolated existence. Now, he found himself harvesting a different and more valuable resource, truth, from the ruins of his former certainties. And like the wasteland itself, that truth was proving both more dangerous and more full of unexpected possibilities than anything Eden 9 had prepared him to discover. Thank you for reading Chapter 2 of Beyond the Dome. If you're enjoying Ash's journey of discovery about the true nature of the post-collapse world, don't forget to like and subscribe for updates on the next chapter. What do you think the full truth about Project Lazarus will reveal? Will Ash and his team ever return to Eden 9? Share your thoughts in the comments below.